a few minutes. We're going to start a few minutes early. I need a few minutes to prepare and get everything situated. So if you're watching on the YouTube side, you may want to refresh your page, and the link to get into the Hangout will actually be in the description box. So that should be posted here in a few seconds. Okay, I posted the link to the Hangout on Google Plus. It doesn't show my event on Google Plus just yet, so that creates a problem. We'll deal with that a little bit later. Alrighty, I've got 7 p.m. Central Time, so we'll go ahead and get started officially. As I wait for people to enter the Hangout or whatever, I'll just go over the housekeeping like I always do. Number one, I ask that you please be respectful. You can dislike my ideas or whatever, but please be respectful of me and the other participants in the Hangout. Secondly, we are here to have fun and to share ideas. So as we talk about politics in America and sometimes around the world. Also, I would ask that you post ideas for future Hangouts in the comment section below. And the fourth thing is maybe a non-starter, but I'd like to have a co-host that would also double as a guest host should I have to miss a Sunday or whatever. And the co-host duties would be to maybe moderate a segment of the program, one of the topics, or what have you. So that's basically all I have for housekeeping. Pardon me. I want to start out by saying that in America, we complain about having long elections, and the next election starts after the last one ends or whatever. And that's really been the history of the Republic. I've read 2 books. Well, I finished one book. I'm reading the second book. The first book I've read is The Great Triumvirate, of course, about Daniel Webster, John Calhoun, and William Clay, whatever, or Henry Clay, I should say, Henry Clay. And so I've read that book, and then I'm reading this book about James K. Polk, who came, who was basically contemporaneous with the Great Triumvirate, maybe a little bit past them or whatever. Of course, he died before any of them died or whatever. But basically, in reading these books, I was reminded of something that I had forgotten. James K. Polk was nominated for the presidency in 1843, a full year before the election, and Henry Clay was nominated for president in 1824. I believe the state convention nominated him in 1821 for that election. And of course, Andrew Jackson started his 1828 campaign the day after he lost the 1824 campaign. So long elections are an American tradition, and for good or ill, that is the way it is. And I don't know, it's just part of the way our system works. And I'd like to get back to doing some book reviews or whatever, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the program. And if nobody joins in, this will be a short hangout or whatever. I'm hoping Joy pops in or whatever. I'm interested to hear how his trip turned out or whatever. But anyway, the first topic we're going to talk about is the Democratic field. This week we had, or I should say within the last 7 or 8 days, we had 2 more people enter the field, Martin O'Malley and Lincoln Chafee or whatever. But so far right now, the field stands at, and these are announced candidates or candidates that have formed an exploratory committee. In other words, they've taken definite steps toward the Democratic nominations. First one is, of course, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley, Lincoln Chafee, and lest we forget, the very first one to form an exploratory committee, Jim Webb. There are some others that are thinking about it. There are some others that are not really serious candidates or whatever. But these 5, I think, are the Democratic field right now. And I'll just go and talk about each one of them in turn. The first one is, of course, Hillary Clinton. And she has the advantages of the Clinton name. she also has the disadvantages of the Clinton name, or they have a I'd call it a machine, an apparatus where they can get pump money into their campaign coffers or whatever, and she is far and away the front runner or whatever, but her numbers are soft. Uh, there was a poll. I'm not going to get the numbers exactly right, but there was a poll that was talked about on Friday, and the people that have unfavorable rating of her, that don't think she's trustworthy, that's in the mid 50s. So over half the population. As far as her strength among independents, which whoever the next president's going to be, they're going to have to carry the independents because, as Howard Baker once said, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are both minority parties. If the independents were a party, they would be, they'd also be a minority party, but they would have the plurality of the votes or whatever. I think it's something like 30 to 40% of the people consider themselves to be independent or whatever. And her ratings among the independents, if I remember correctly, something in the mid 30s. So maybe 1/3 of the independents or whatever, which to me would be, I know it's real early, which to me would not be enough to carry the election or whatever. So she's got a lot of work to do, both in terms of reaching out to independents. I think she has her core base or whatever. I don't think those votes are going to go anywhere. The yellow dog Democrats will vote for her, but as far as getting some independents or whatever, and people in the middle, the moderates, I'm not sure she's going to be able to reach out to them or whatever. She's got to explain for the money coming into the Clinton Foundation. I've already spoken about that before. That money, her campaign donors or whatever, she has to explain why the big bankers don't care if it's her or Jeb Bush that becomes the next president or whatever. So it's just, she's got to explain how she can help the average American working class. How can we put our kids through college or whatever, and find affordable housing, and deal with the problems of minority unemployment and things of that nature or whatever. She's got a lot of explaining to do to convince, I think, the middle people that she can provide results for them when she becomes president. The other thing I think when she becomes president is, I think there's a 60% chance that she'll have a Republican Congress that she'll have to deal with. So how does she deal with a Republican Congress or whatever? So she has a lot of work to do ahead of her, which brings us to the next guy on the list, Bernie Sanders, who I don't understand that he's running as a Democrat. I think he'd have a chance to be an independent candidate for president, and he still may do that. He still may do that. He may, if he gets beat real bad by the time he gets to Florida, which I think is the fourth or fifth electoral contest, he may declare, I'm a independent socialist or whatever. But here's the thing: if he can get 35% of the votes in Iowa, or 35% of the votes in New Hampshire against Hillary's whatever percentage she gets, whatever, I think Hillary Clinton at that point will be hamstrung, because that will have proved that he's gotten into her base or whatever. So that'd be interesting to see. So I like Bernie Sanders. I don't know if he can go the distance or whatever. We'll see. Martin O'Malley has been an executive for 15 or 16 years, the mayor of Baltimore, the governor of Maryland or whatever, and his Baltimore record is kind of dicey. The Maryland record, I think, is a little bit better or whatever. So he will have some explaining to do, and he will probably reach out to a more liberal. He's probably going to run to the left of Hillary or whatever. So that'll be interesting to see how he does in the early primaries. I think his candidacy. I'm not sure he wants to be vice president. Having been the head guy for 16 years, but I think he's running as an insurance policy in case of something comes out about Hillary, either a smoking gun about Benghazi or some of her financial dealings or whatever. So he's running as an insurance policy or whatever. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. Lincoln Chafee was a Republican, then he was an independent, now he's a Democrat. He's been someone is joining us. Welcome, Blue.
How's it going?
So far, so good. I'm just discussing the Democratic field or whatever.
I was listening.
Okay, so what do you think about the Democrats so far?
Well, first of all, let me caveat that I'm not a fan of either parties.
Me neither.
I think Hillary, unless there's a more viable candidate, will probably be the Democrat.
Yeah.
I'd vote for Bernie just to, may say, spit in the eyes of the Republican and the Democrats for failing to do their jobs.
Yeah.
As far as the other two gentlemen, which I can't remember right off the top of my head, I don't think they're even closely viable.
Yeah. Well, Lincoln Chafee, who I just kind of discussed, he's a weird person. He's Republican, independent, and now he's a Democrat. And I think what he's done is he's alienated all three groups, especially when he comes out and says we need to adopt a metric system yesterday. I don't see him as a serious candidate. And Jim Webb, I like Jim Webb. He actually served in the Reagan administration or whatever. I think he was Secretary of the Navy under President Reagan. I like him, but he doesn't seem to be getting any kind of traction or whatever. But I don't think much of this field. But we'll wait and see what happens. Just on a side note, I don't know if you've been watching the Google Plus or whatever, but evidently Joy made it to his destination safe and secure. So
yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
As far as the Republican side out there, once again, I think they're killing themselves. They have too many candidates running for office. I think in the end, it's just going to cause them more problems than it will help them. I think they're giving Hillary a cakewalk to the White House.
Yeah.
Even though she has declining numbers right now, but we're still early in the race.
Oh yeah.
Of race. We're not even to the starting gate officially yet.
Well, it doesn't take very much money to participate in the Iowa caucuses or whatever. There's 4 or 5 primaries that happen in December and January, and I think Nevada's one of them. And then, of course, the 4 we're familiar with is Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Florida. I think by the time we get to Florida, 24 hours after we get to Florida, we'll be down to 4 candidates. I think 2 of those candidates will be Jeb Bush and Rand Paul. And the other 2, I have no idea. But the field will get weeded down pretty fast, I think.
Well, you might have one like you had last time. They'll have enough people that you can have a flavor of the week. With the numbers you're seeing now, you could have the flavor of the day, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, that's true. But I think what's going to happen it's not going to be the numbers you're going to have to watch is the numbers in the bank account. If they can't get some billionaire to finance a PAC or whatever they're called now, then they'll be dropping like flies or whatever. And like I say, Rand Paul, he's got his dad's organization or whatever, and college kids will donate to him. So I think he can go the difference. I think you go all the way to the.
Then you got the factor of the Koch brothers. They're prepared
Yeah.
to spend over $1 billion to have whoever they support, and it's going to be about the money. But I don't think you will see it. I think you will see people hanging in longer than just the Florida vote. I think you will see something along the lines of what you saw last time. And here's the problem: if the Republicans really want to live, here's the two things that the Republicans got to hope for: that the Democrats won't turn out in number. Right
Yeah.
there, it's always been proven, especially in the last 2 or 3 decades, that when you have a low turnout, it favors the Republicans. When you have a high turnout, it favors the Democrats. That's one thing. Second, I think they're going to have a candidate that's going to have to come to the middle of the road. You're not going to get one that's people are going to support on the Republican side that wants to stay on the extremist side of the right wing. I don't think they have any a snowball's chance on a hot griddle in getting elected if they stay there. I think the one you're going to see that has the best chance is the one that comes back to the center. And yeah, he's going to be accused of being a rhino.
Well, that's true, but at this point, it's a rhino is going to be the one that can win the election. Now, the Supreme Court, if they come down on the right side of gay marriage, then that'll take an issue away from the GOP, or something that they won't have to campaign on. They won't have to say one way or the other. They'll just say, well, the Supreme Court has made their decision or whatever. But I'm like you. We're going to have a more forward-looking Republican or whatever. And 5 years ago, I would have said that was Jeb Bush or whatever, but now I'm not so sure. So we'll just have to wait and see or whatever. And anyways, I'm very, very excited to keep track of what's going on. You said it's a flavor of the day or whatever, and it's like every day we get another news story or whatever. So it's, I mean, as a history buff and a politics buff, for me, that's very exciting. So let's go ahead and talk about our second topic, which is the minimum wage. Do you think, Blue, it needs to be raised?
That's a hard question, Marvin. It depends on where you're at in the United States and whether the economy can support it. Okay, look at what are we looking at as an unemployment rate right now? 5.6, is that correct?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
But we know after many decades of studying that's a false number.
Right.
Depending on what part of the United States you go to, you can double or triple that to what the actual unemployment rate is.
Yeah,
I think it's going to have to go on what in each individual area that the economy can support. If the economy cannot support $15 an hour, you're not going to see it.
Yeah. And well, I think what I'm thinking about now is some places like Seattle or whatever, they're going to raise theirs to $15 an hour. And like you say, that area can afford it. San Francisco is another area that's doing really, really well or whatever. Austin is doing really, really well or whatever. But some places like, I don't know, Chicago, some of these inner cities. But so I think, I think there needs to be a federal minimum wage. And it probably needs to be raised by like maybe $1 or $2 or whatever. And then every state should be able to raise it higher, as you say, based on the local economy or whatever.
On a national level, Marvin, with the Republican Congress as you have it now, it's not going to happen.
No.
And it depends on the state. Once again, I think it comes down to which economies and what area of the country can support that you might see it. I think, like Washington, Seattle, San Francisco, I think you're going to see those more liberal entities try to force the issue. Now, will they destroy business opportunities or will they create it? I think it's too early to say right now.
Yeah, well, the early data would show that it has not destroyed the economy. Now, of course, those places that we've talked about are all high-tech places, so you probably don't have a big demand for minimum wage jobs there to begin with or whatever. But if I live in New York City and I'm a waiter or a fast food worker, or I work at a grocery store or Home Depot or some of these places, if you want me to work there, you're going to have to pay me enough to live there, because I don't want to commute an hour and a half every day to work because I can afford an apartment in New Jersey or someplace, you know. So I mean, I'm like you. I think there should be a basic federal minimum wage. I think it should be raised maybe $1, and then each I would do it state by state, but community by community, you know, either way. And so far, knock on wood, it hasn't hurt the cities that have raised the minimum wage. But that's always been, you know, the thing about it is, I forget where I heard this number, but more and more Americans are spending towards 50% of their income just on housing. So they have their apartment, and then they don't really have any discretionary income or whatever. So that to me would slow the economy down. It just seems like to me that if we could raise and people that make the minimum wage, historically they spend their money, you know. If they have it, they will spend it or whatever. So I don't know. I'm kind of like you. I don't think anything's going to change in the immediate future, but I think the states and local governments can decide for themselves what they think adequate minimum wage is.
I don't think you're going to see it in Texas, Marvin.
Oh, no. And the only place I think you would see it in Texas might be Austin. That might be the only place or whatever.
I think to really see how this is working out, we've got to see what it does in a longer time frame of 3 to 4 years. I think by 5 years we'll know if raising minimum wages to the levels they have and on the West Coast is actually going to be viable. I think we need more time to see what actually transpires over time and then the short term. But as far as Texas goes, New Mexico, a lot of the Republican states or red states, I don't think it's going to happen, Marvin.
Well, I lived in Atlanta in the 1980s, and there was a tremendous amount of growth there, and our unemployment rate got down to about 4%. So nobody was paying minimum wage. You know, you go to work. I think at that time minimum wage was $3.35 an hour or whatever when I got into labor force, and I can remember seeing McDonald's was begging for help, and they were paying $7-8 an hour, which was double the minimum wage. You know, just for people to come in off the street or whatever. So if unemployment goes down, the arguments for raising the minimum wage will be mute, because nobody, I mean, labor will be so tight. Everybody will raise their wages or whatever. So I was very, very encouraged by the employment numbers on Friday. I don't know how good those jobs are, but more and more people are working. So I think that's always a good thing. So any other comments?
Issue, one other issue you got to look at. In a lot of places, you're having a problem with, you're getting people underemployed, but they're underemployed,
right,
to what their skill levels. And right. I know in my community, Marvin, that's a problem. Yeah. I think you're seeing it across the United States, where you have a workforce that is more educated or highly skilled, but simply the jobs are not out there, and somebody's going to have to address the issue of underemployment in America, and it is an issue. And I don't think I've heard any of the people running speak to that issue.
Yeah, well, when we were in high school, who did we make fun of? We made fun of the people in shop class or whatever, you know, and everybody was told, go to college, go to college, go to college. So a lot of us went to college and got degrees or whatever. And the people that went to shop class and got a technical degree or whatever you want to call it, they're the ones that have the good jobs now. The machinists and the plumbers and the electricians. They're the ones that have the good jobs now. And people that have college degrees, there's just not that many good jobs out there,
How
unless you're
far
in
can
a.
you go? How far can you go on a liberal arts degree? Really? I mean,
Uh,
and plus we have another problem with other degrees. They're turning them out like cookie cutter degrees. They're
yeah,
worthless. People are coming
yeah.
out of college with degrees. They can't take what they've learned in college and apply it to a real world situation. That is another issue. Also, the enormous debt we've incurred from people going to college.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, we've got to come to realize not everybody needs to be in college.
yeah, yeah. Well, I was lucky. I didn't actually go into debt for my college. I would work and go to school, and sometimes I didn't have money, so I'd work some more and go back to school or whatever. So I was real lucky in that regard. But you've already got into our next topic, which is higher education. And I saw something on the Nightly Business Report on Friday night. There is a school in New York City, and I forget the name of it. But you go there for 4 months. It costs $15,000, but you go there for 4 months, and they teach you how to write computer code. In other words, how to be a software programmer. And they don't care if you have a high school, a diploma, or a college degree, or a master's, whatever. They'll train you for 4 months, and 99% of their graduates get good jobs that start at $70K a year. And anybody that has a website needs a programmer.
Well,
And
my feeling, Marvin, is okay. Here's one of the greatest part of our workforce that I don't think we're paying attention to, Marvin, is the women or the
yeah,
females. We're not pushing our young ladies to go into the sciences, the
yeah,
technologies,
the
uh,
uh, the STEM,
engineerings,
right,
that kind of stuff. And remember, they make up more than 50% of our population, Marvin. And
yeah,
if we want to move our economy, we have to engage that sector of our workforce and get them to be something more than, housewives,
yeah.
uh, baby makers. I'm sorry to put it that way, but that's the hard truth about it.
Well, I've been a manager in a lot of different capacities or whatever, and I would much rather have a female employee than a male employee, because it seemed like you have twice as many problems with a male employee that you do with a female employee, and that's just my personal experience or whatever, But I'm like you. But here's the point. Rather than send people off for 4 or 5 years to get a liberal arts degree in philosophy or history or whatever, uh, can't we send them to a technical school for, in the case I brought up, for as little as 4 months, teach them how to do a skill that they can get a job immediately, you know? I think we need to rethink the higher education. I think we need to make it more competitive. For example, uh, if I were the president of the United States, I would try to make it a law to no kid would have to pay out of state fees if he wanted to go to a public school. In other words, if there's a kid in your neighborhood that wants to go to a New Mexico school, he shouldn't have to pay out of state fees or whatever. I think that would make it more competitive or whatever. And then I think we should do more education online. We could triple the capacity of all of our schools if we said, 2 days a week you're going to study online with your teacher, and then one day a week you'll drive to college and you'll actually be in the classroom 1 day a week. We could triple the capacity of every school in the country just by doing that.
Here's another issue is we have people going to degrees, and 50%, 40 to 50% of what they're having to take, Marvin, is nonsense. They never
Yeah,
apply it to their jobs. It's just to keep those in the upper echelon of the educational college system, university system, in a lifestyle they think they should be accustomed to. And I still don't believe the United States will ever be defeated by bombs and bullets. But where we will lose is we cannot retool our workforce,
Yeah.
re-educate our workforce in a timely manner. It taking 6, 7, 10 years to get certain degrees is simply nonsense when most of that, at least 40% of it, is taken up times with stuff you don't need to be educated on.
Yeah, I think Germany does a really, really good job of educating its young people or whatever. And they tell them they have to take a test. I think it's in their sophomore year in high school, you know, your college grade or you're not college grade or whatever. And even when you go to their colleges, they're not like our colleges. Their classes are generally a little bit bigger than our classes or whatever. Their professors work a little bit harder or whatever. They don't have as many assistants, but all these things keep the cost down. And if you're a German student at a university, you know you're there to work. You're not there to play or whatever. So I think there's lots of things we can do to improve our educational system or whatever. And
I think the other issue is the overhead. What I mean about, excuse me, Marvin, what I mean about the overhead is the employees are the people running the school that do nothing getting down in the trench to teach anybody anything. They're simply in a position and taking a paycheck. And I think we need to look into that and get rid of that. We need to, you either perform in educating people or you're gone. And we have a bad problem in Texas with that in a lot of our higher education universities where we got a mass of people that are basically being paid and they're not in the classroom. And
right.
And I'm one of those ones. I don't know if we should be pouring billions of dollars into football or athletic programs. I think that's ridiculous. I think it defeats the purpose of education. I think, we spend more money in promoting the athletes than we do promoting the people that are going to change the future with whatever field they go into. And I think that's the stupidity we've gotten into with our higher education in the United States.
Yeah. Well, I won't talk about the athletics or whatever, because I think that's a mixed bag. I mean, you could argue that athletics is what gets your alumni to donate to the school or whatever and keep it going. So I don't want to touch that. But the other point you raised is about professors having tenure. I remember at the University of Georgia, I had a philosophy professor who had tenure, but he was the biggest jerk at the school, and he always got bad reviews, from his students or whatever, and we had no recourse at all because he had tenure. And then just this morning on the news, I heard about a professor. I forget where she's from. I think she's from Northwestern or whatever. Anyway, she wrote an op-ed, and she has tenure. And she wrote an op-ed and said that she thinks sex between students and professors should be allowed. That it's freedom of expression. That it should be allowed. And
you're dealing with adults now. I have to question somebody who's in a position of authority doing that. But we have to admit, we're not talking about children, Marvin. We're talking about grown adults that you can't control what they're going to do. You can say, hey, it's not a good thing, but ultimately it comes down to people being personally responsible, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Well, I was an education major, and I had professor after professor tell me, if you ever talk to a girl, make sure the door is wide open, because this professor had said that he had been propositioned, how can I make an A in this class, a doctor or whatever, and but I just think whenever someone in authority dates someone, underneath them or whatever, you're just asking for trouble. You're just asking for trouble, man. It doesn't go well. But I think one thing we could do is we could just eliminate tenure and say, if you're a professor at the college level, you must produce. You must, be an effective teacher. Otherwise, we're going to toss you. just because you've been teaching the same thing for 30 years doesn't mean, you know, you're great at it or whatever, because you've taught the same thing for 30 years, you know. So that's.
And my last issue with it is, for example, I won't say the university it is that's in the town I'm nearest to.
Mhm.
Their chancellor has been promising people for at least a decade or more how they were going to become a tier 1 college, and this person has failed to deliver. But there you have certain power blocks within the community that this person is going to be supported in that position no matter how poorly they perform.
Yeah.
And also they have a certain percentage, they're not graduating in a timely manner, but
Mhm.
you still have the powers that be in the community that will support this person no matter what. And yes, you got to blame it on the voters out there
Yeah.
and the public not getting majority, not getting involved and allowing this nonsense. But this is not just isolated to this one school. You can go across the United States and find this issue.
Well, I was thinking about what is it called, the University of Texas system or whatever, and I know it's all about the politics. I mean, they've got a chancellor over the whole system, then each school has a president or whatever, and basically it's just politics. How many senators do I have in my back pocket, and I'll just do whatever I want to do, and the trustees can't get me out or whatever. So I know there's a lot wrong with higher education, and we're definitely not going to solve it tonight. But anyway, those are the three topics I wanted to talk about, and now we're just throw it open to whatever we want to talk about. Do you have anything you want to talk about, Blue?
What do you think about Rick Perry running?
Uh, uh, well, you know, I don't see where he has much chance of it. To be honest with you, or whatever. And someone that's been in power, who's been the governor for 14 years, he's not going to be the second fiddle to anybody. So I don't think he's running for vice president. I think I'll be honest with you, I don't think he'll be the four that I'm predicting will survive past Florida. I don't think so. I think he might do well in Iowa, but the guy from Pennsylvania, if anybody has the advantage in Iowa, it was him, because he actually won, you know, the last time, and they had miscounted the votes or whatever, and he had actually won Iowa. But I don't know. I don't think you can pull the upset off or whatever. Of course, if he makes another gaffe, then you know he's out for sure or whatever. But it'll be interesting to see.
I think once his record catches up for him, as people from Texas and somebody who follows Texas and what has happened under Perry, you know, this guy tried to sell our highways to foreign investors. You have to question whether where this guy's loyalties are really at. You have a guy who basically rewarded his supporters and cronies through different programs, basically giving them tax dollars where they didn't really deliver anything of substance. You got, okay, TxDOT nearly went bankrupt and is still very in bad shape. And you did hear that they did pass the infrastructure bill this week.
Yeah. Well, whenever there's some new highway built in the Houston area, it's a toll road. You can mark that down in your book. And I don't know if it's because the DOT doesn't have the money in its coffers to do it or whatever, but the Katy Freeway, that's tollway now, or a big part of it is or whatever. And then the one they're doing, the 249, which would go from Houston to Bryan College Station, which we already have a road from Houston to Bryan College Station. I don't understand why they're doing another one, but and also, what is it, the 59 that they want to run from the Texas border all the way to Canada or whatever. It's a lot of that's very, very fishy to me or whatever. And so
59 was the one that Perry tried to sell to foreign investors.
Yeah.
Also, they got to realize this man, our Department of Public Safety in Texas, he drug it so far down that it almost went into receivership, Marvin. A lot
Yeah.
of people don't realize Texas juvenile justice system, what was allowed to happen to the youths that were, they're little criminals, but were in the custody and care of the state of Texas. They were being sexually abused
Yeah.
by not only inmates but staff.
Yeah.
And the only reason it stopped is because the Department of Justice stepped in to stop it. And that was Bush 2.0 Justice Department that did that. And
Yeah.
Perry just has, when you start looking closer at his record, he hasn't done as great. And also, don't believe the nonsense that Texas doesn't have debt. Texas does have debt, Marvin.
Yeah.
You know, and they came up with a system, Marvin, where they're allowed to hide a lot of it by creative bookkeeping.
Right.
If
Right.
people really knew in Texas how much they were in debt, they would not be happy right now. And the
Well,
problem is, go to the comptroller of the state of Texas, Marvin, and ask them, can you tell me how much our debt is? The answer you'll get is that we have a constitutional amendment that we have a balanced budget. That's all you're going to get out of them.
yeah.
They're not going to tell you what the debt is. And we know they do hide debt. With the red ink, they have known, like when Perry was last elected, let everybody know. They hid that debt until Perry was elected. And what we find out, our comptroller made an error of nearly $4 billion. Perry, once his record comes out, I don't think he'll stand, Marvin.
No. No. I've never been a big fan of Rick Perry. I've always voted against him or whatever. Part of that is because he supported Al Gore in 1988, and he was a Democrat or whatever. And another part of that is he claims to have not raised taxes or whatever, but he has raised the fees on everything we do here in Texas, from getting the driver's license to getting
Marvin. Here's the truth about taxation in Texas. You always hear people like Perry and the Republican Party saying how they've reduced taxes in Texas. At the state level, they've basically moved that responsibility
Yeah.
to level where the lawyers are paying the property owners are what's paying the taxes. They've just moved it into the county level and the city level. And as far as really reducing your taxes, go see how much the tax level has increased locally in the state of Texas under Perry and what we have now.
Mm-hmm. Well, you made some really good points, and I'm like you. I don't think Rick Perry will get very far or whatever. But if he does better than what he did last time, he can retire and say, "Hey, I made somewhat of a comeback or whatever." So,
oops.
Anything else you want to talk about?
What do you think of the Pacific Rim agreement that's being finalized right now?
I think it's going to hurt. I think it's going to be a net loss for American jobs, quite frankly, or whatever. I think it might help some, like the areas we were talking about, California, the Pacific Northwest, the ones that have, the longshoremen or whatever that will be unloading the ships as they come in or whatever. It'll help their economy, but if I have a small factory in Kentucky or whatever, it's probably going to put me out of business. Because I can't compete with China, or India or some of these other places or whatever. So I think it's going to be a net loss for American jobs, just kind of like NAFTA. I think NAFTA generally hurt our economy, in terms of good quality jobs. So that's my thoughts on it. It's going to go through. That's a given. Obama supports it. Clinton supported it, but she's not saying that now. But if she gets in the office, she'll support it. The Republican leadership in the United States Congress supports it. So it'll go through. and the American worker will take another hit. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, it's being looked on negatively along the border, southern border of the U.S. Everybody sees another round of what happened with NAFTA. Remember, NAFTA was supposed to do all these things, but it never did. You know, I think the same uh, things are being promised with this agreement, and 5 or 6 years down the road, we're going to find out. Once again, we've been sold down the creek by our politicians.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, the history lesson is the reason we didn't do anything after Tiananmen Square was because Bush, Baker, and Scowcroft all were heavily invested in China. So we didn't
Well,
do
we're seeing
anything.
the outcomes of that now
Yeah,
with China. China wants to claim thousands of square miles of open ocean as theirs. And I'm sorry, Marvin, them building artificial islands, well, those islands aren't considered under international law real islands. They have to be natural, and they have to be above the highest tide for that area to be considered actual islands. And what they're trying to do is what the one part of the international law says is that they can claim, not actually claim, but show some possession up to 200 nautical miles out from their what they call their border. It's not
yeah,
12 miles; it's 200 miles.
yeah. Well,
And I think we're
uh,
about to get in a conflict with them. Once again, we're overflying these islands. Uh,
yeah,
but remember, with the help of the Republicans and the Democrats, they basically are helped arm our enemy. And I'm sorry, you can take a Chi-Com and put him in a 21st century business suit. He's still a communist red Chinese. And don't believe that at the heart of his belief is Maoism.
yeah. Didn't we have the same problem in the 1950s with some islands that were between Taiwan and China or whatever? Seems like they always want islands. Uh, but unlike you, I don't think anything. I think they're going to get the islands. I think they're going to use them as airstrips or whatever, and that'll just be the way it is or whatever.
Well,
So
they're already being shown to be militarizing them. They're
yeah,
putting heavy weapons on them. So their intent is understood if you're watching what doing. And there's some people saying now whether our American politicians want to believe it or not, we're technically at war with China now. At least on the cyber level.
yeah,
Especially when we see the type of breaches we've seen within the last couple of months that can be traced directly back to China.
yeah,
Um, and but the problem is, I don't think we have politicians with the spine to stand up and tell the American people, these are not our friends.
no, no. I agree with you on that one. China just seems to be able to get away with whatever they want to get away with or whatever, and as long as some Americans are making some money off of it, there doesn't seem to be a big deal about it or whatever. So, well, I think I've talked about everything that I want to talk about, and so what we're going to do is we're going to take it. We're going to stop the live broadcast of the Hangout, but we'll continue for a few more minutes, just in a Google Hangout or whatever. So, but before I sign off, I just wanted to say, uh, it's this Hangout is not going the way I want it to go or whatever, in terms of picking up an audience or whatever. So I may go on hiatus next week or whatever and kind of think about that. Um, I am thinking about doing another hangout or whatever, but it may not be on politics. So bear with me and keep watching. I'll come up with something. So at this point, I want to thank everybody for watching, and we're going to stop the YouTube broadcast.